And now I would like to kick off our first session of the day. The AFTD Persons with FTD Advisory Council helps to ensure that the insights of people living with a diagnosis inform the development of AFTD's policies, programs, and services. The council works alongside our advocacy manager, Matt Sharp. Please welcome Matt and the Persons with FTD Advisory Council.
Thank you, Esther. Welcome to everyone here in Houston and all of you out there watching online. It's been my pleasure to work with AFTD's Persons with FTD Advisory Council since it began as an informal think tank and have seen it evolve into an advisory council chartered by AFTD's Board of Directors. One of the goals of for the council, as stated in the charter, is to provide a mechanism to ensure the insights and wisdom of people diagnosed inform the development of policies, programs, and services at AFTD. This insight and wisdom are especially important regarding the stigma of FTD. Those of us who do not carry a diagnosis are susceptible to the stigma of FTD, but to understand the damage it does, we really need to listen to those who are living with the disease. Today's talks are the result of months of work, coming up with thoughts and bouncing ideas around, putting those thoughts in writing, editing, rewriting, overcoming computer issues, and finally practice, practice, practice. They may seem polished today, but for the last 4 months, I've seen the council hard work and felt the struggles they've gone through. But I believe they are thankful today to finally just speak. 5 members of the Advisory Council are on hand to share their experience of stigma. Unfortunately, 2 members, Cindy Odell and the Council Co-Chair Amy Shives, were not able to travel to join us today. Today you will hear from the rest of the Council, the other Co-Chair, Ann Farguson, Bob Medall, Seth Stern, Sandy Howe, and Kevin Rhodes. And with that, I am pleased to turn it over to Ann.
Good morning. My name is Ann Farguson. I live in Sacramento, California, and I've had behavioral variant FTD for almost 20 years. I participate heavily in research towards a cure, but today I would like to talk to you about something that affects us all, especially those that have FTD at the beginnings and going on of different levels, and that would be stigma. Stigma is an interesting word. The Britannica Dictionary's simple definition is a set of negative and often unfair beliefs that a society or a group of people have about something. As I thought about this, I would say yes, stigma is always negative, but is it always an unfair belief? I would say no. Do people with FTD sometimes act inappropriately in public? Yes, I have a friend with FTD that is banned from the Lowe's store because of his anger outbursts. Are there people with FTD that steal food at the market for candies or cookies and then end up in jail? Last year's AFTD conference keynote speaker mentioned that there are probably many people in prison because of FTD. So yes, while these examples are negative, they are true. As I continued to think about this, I realized that when I go to AFTD meet and greets and caregivers don't want to talk to me, or at AFTD volunteer meetings when the group finds out that you are not a caregiver and they get quiet because they don't want to include me in the conversation, I remind myself that this is where stigma starts. It's in our homes and in our own AFTD backyard. So now how do we as persons with FTD relate to all this? We can't change who we are. This is what FTD has done to us. I would kindly ask AFTD and caregivers to take the time to hear us, take the time to allow us to struggle a little instead of jumping in to rescue. I am hopeful if we work together, we will probably turn the embarrassment of stigma around. I'd like to have Bob continue with his.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Ann. I'm Bob Madaw. I live in Des Moines, Iowa, and I have had BVFTD for about 25 years. As previously mentioned, stigma refers to a set of negative or unfair beliefs. One addition that I would add is that these often come from people who have no knowledge or understanding of the people that are being stigmatized, regardless of whether but today we're specifically speaking about frontal temporal dementia. But the same stigma is associated with all neurocognitive disorders that get lumped under the word dementia. Now, not all dementia, or not all physicians or healthcare providers are immune to the effects of giving out stigma. For example, I was visiting an orthopedic surgeon who I've known since 1985 and has operated on me many times. My wife, Kathy, was with me sitting over the side of the room, and I heard the surgeon tell his nurse that I have FTD in addition to the shoulder injury I was seeing him for. So the nurse comes up and turns to my wife and starts asking her the questions, not me, and I was standing right next to her. So my wife looks at me and starts answering the questions. After the first two questions, the surgeon says, "Mary, come here for a minute." And so the nurse returns to the other end of the room and, "Did you see me talking to the patient when you came in the room?" "Yes," Mary said. "Then why are you asking his wife questions I told you to ask the patient?" "Didn't you tell me he had FTD?" she responded. "Yes," said the surgeon, "but that doesn't mean he's incapable of talking or answering questions. Always start out talking directly to the patient. If the patient can't respond or doesn't know the answer, then we'll ask the spouse or whoever else is with them. Now, go back and finish filling out the questionnaire." Luckily for me, this is an example of a physician who had spent time and effort actively working against the stigma of FTD and dementia. He did this pretty easily, I might add, because he knows me, Bob, as a person, not as just a diagnosis. My interaction that day did not put me in any danger of any physical harm, but that's not always the case. For instance, a few years ago, I had my pacemaker replaced. So I'm on the operating table, and the surgeon, who I had not met, walks in, notices this long scar in the middle of my chest. "Oh, when did you have stents put in?" he asked. Obviously, he had not read my medical records. They were from surgeries when I was 14 and 16 years old. "Well, I think we're going to have to run a line from your groin up to your heart," the surgeon said. "No, that won't be necessary," said a man in a suit sitting in the corner of the room at a computer. I later found out he was a technician from the pacemaker company who seemed to be running the show except for doing the cutting. So I said, "Well, we're going to give you some Versed, anesthetic, put you out for procedure." And I said, "No, I can't take that because of my FTD." A short discussion followed. Then the nurse anesthetist said, "Oh, that's okay. We'll just give you some Benadryl," which is in the same class as the Versed. And I said, "I shouldn't take any Benadryl." And I was out like a light before I get the sentence out. Luckily, I did not have any long-term negative effects. But so there's 3 highly educated in that operating room that day, and none of them took the time to understand my condition or even read my medical records. While I can't say exactly what they did or didn't know or what I said, but after 20 years or wasn't 20 years then, but the length of time, I was the only one that was not being paid attention to. So that is why we are here at the annual conference of the Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration. Notice, degeneration, not dementia, in the title. And I used to always tell people I have FTD, which used to mean frontotemporal dementia. Now I tell people I suffer from frontotemporal degeneration, leaving the word dementia out of the discussion. And frequently it's like, "Oh, what's that?" Most people ask, so I can explain FTD without making them think I was Bela Lugosi or a Boris Karloff character from a little movie. So the stigma starts with the word dementia, and I know how much trouble one word can cause. Your turn, Seth.
Thank you, Bob. My name is Dr. Seth Stern. I'm a retired OBGYN physician after 37 years due to difficulties related to primary progressive aphasia, FTD. I was diagnosed with this condition in 2022 after years of knowing that something was off. My journey started back in 2017. During that time, I had trouble with word finding or completing sentences. Events occurred that were very atypical for me. I'm one who usually dots his I's and crosses T's. Even though I'm very compulsive about my schedule, I showed up for a funeral wake on a wrong day. I made coffee without placing the coffee mug in the machine. I left my car running after driving. And then I left my condo front door unlocked at night. All these events are extremely atypical for me. And then, most importantly, despite always loving being a physician, being one of the first people in the hospital and one of the last to leave, I became very apathetic concerning medical care. I knew something was wrong. During this time, I was seen by multiple doctors and neurologists. My blood work, cognitive tests, and imaging studies initially all came back as fine. But then in 2022, a brain PET scan came back with FTD changes. I was seen by neurocognitive specialists at NYU and Columbia, who initially felt that my imaging study must be incorrect since I scored so high on my cognitive tests. A repeat brain PET MRI was performed and once more confirmed FTD. You may think that there's nothing wrong with me. However, this is incorrect. I'm considered to be in the early stages of FTD with significant cognitive reserve. Today is one of my better days. However, on a bad day, I can have significant difficulties with word finding, completing my sentences, participating in activities, or even remembering what I said or what I did. My experience with FTD is that most people are empathetic, but there is definitely a stigma associated with it. There are times that I feel that I'm invisible, that my thoughts and feelings don't really matter to others. People talk over me, and people do not always give me time to find my words or to complete my sentences. An example is when I went to a doctor's appointment and the doctor, instead of speaking to me directly, spoke to my wife and said, "Well, how's he doing?" rather than asking me the question. Another example is when I had a meeting scheduled with a couple for dinner with my wife, and 2 days before the meeting, I was called by the husband who said that he wanted to cancel our dinner appointment because his wife found out that I have FTD and she didn't want to eat with us because she would get depressed. How thoughtless. Although I'm in the early stages of FTD, people often treat me as if my condition is advanced. They do not give me the benefit of finding out how I am truly. FTD can cause difficulties relating to word finding, communication, behavior, and memory. Currently, there is no medical or surgical form of treatment. FTD is extremely rare. It is quite unfortunate that Bruce Willis and Wendy Williams also have FTD. However, both these celebrities have greatly improved both public and healthcare awareness regarding FTD. You are all very important in what you do, but I'm asking for much more. Every day I can tell that I am losing bits and pieces of myself. So many others, as well as myself, are struggling. We have difficulties in conversation, word finding, behavior, motor skills, and decision making. Help me to help others. Take an active approach, pursue further research, fight for adequate FTD and dementia funding, promote healthcare education regarding cognitive disorders, encourage social media awareness and community outreach programs, and finally, encourage compassion, respect, and dignity to those that are unfortunately affected. Thank you. Now that I'd like to introduce Sandy Howe.
Thank you, Seth. I'm Sandy Howe from Edmonds, Washington, and worked as an engineer until FTD raised its ugly head. I have two experiences to share. First, looking at the other side of stigma, where people make a positive judgment of others to make everyone feel better. Then a story about me assigning stigma to another woman with dementia. Being in nature is life-giving for me. My husband and I have traveled the roads less traveled in our truck camper to many FTD conferences. Traveling and meeting others definitely fulfills my social needs. I can talk to different people and say the same thing to everyone I meet. At times, I would share my FTD story. Those conversations often ended quickly. However, some people wanted to know more, which unexpectedly made me feel validated and at least listened to. At one campground, I decided to not talk about FTD, instead just say, we are traveling around the beautiful Southwest. One day, we were hiking and a couple stopped by. Quickly, I started asking questions. This is my go-to strategy to control a conversation at my own pace, avoiding any difficulties or communication problems. The conversation became unexpectedly deep and open. The man shared that they were going to see his dad who had dementia. He said he wanted to be a better son and have a better relationship with his dad, and asked me, do you have any experience with dementia? I said, yes, my mom had dementia. Oh, whoops, me too. I began to share my trials with FTD and finding the right words, stopping mid-sentence, or when I always think I know best, even though I don't. He said, oh, you can't have dementia because you're not like my dad. This comment never feels good, but ultimately I cannot control what others think of me, and I'm kind of okay with that. I explained that not all dementias are the same, and there's a huge gap between early and late stage dementia. Also, each person with dementia is different, and symptoms vary and are not the same from day to day. Finally, I said his dad's brain was failing, and his dad was not trying to push you away or on purpose. At this point, the man was in tears and thankful to learn from someone who knew what dementia was firsthand. I was hot and exhausted, yet sharing with him was very rewarding. My second story is about a time when I was guilty of saying to someone, you can't have dementia, you seem fine. I heard that an acquaintance of mine named Sue had dementia. I immediately put her in my mind's dementia box, making judgments of what she could and could not do. I expected her to have poor self-care and obvious thinking disabilities. Yet when I observed her, she was dressed nicely, walked confidently, and seemed intelligent as well. So now what? She can't have dementia, she seems fine. I had refused to accept that she had a disease, and now I'm the one dismissing her disease. Thankfully, I did not say that to Sue. In conclusion, I wish that others could understand how hard I'm working to try to keep up with conversations, to answer questions, and to maintain, quote, normal behavior. When I hear the same person immediately repeating, "You can't have dementia, you seem fine," that is not helpful. It makes me frustrated, angry, and ultimately sad. Yes, I know it can be meant as a positive statement, but hearing it over and over from someone who doesn't learn about dementia, let alone FTD, and cannot hear about my struggles hurts. I start to think less of those people and start avoiding them because they think they know it all based on some association with dementia. I'm tired of it, and I just want to be accepted as me. Next up is Kevin.
Thank you, Sandy. My name is Kevin Rhodes. I live in Manchester, New Hampshire, and I have BV-FTD. We walk a lonely road sometimes, and sometimes we walk it alone. It is FTD that can cause you to have continued stigma about your disease, and sometimes it truly does feel like we are walking alone. I personally have faced the stigma of this disease, and I dedicate this poem to all of you with FTD. The stigma of FTD. I have FTD, and it has a really bad stigma. It is like I have a big bad enigma. That is the hand that keeps on giving. That is the world in which I am living. What I have, I really care, that the stigma of it all lays me bare. Some relatives who know what I have ghosted me like I'm a bad and stinky salve. My family cares for me greatly, but some others remind me of how I am viewed as lately. I have not a job, not really retired, can't drive, and sometimes can't talk. As a person with behavioral FTD, that is the stigma with which I walk. When I go out with friends, whether casual or formal, my wife gets told that I really appear normal. Is his FTD getting better, they say? But lo and behold, that old stigma is here to stay. For to be viewed as normal just means to me that working or driving is what is not allowed to be. Sometimes with the doctor I get ignored, like I fell asleep and snored. So my friends with FTD, don't you see, there is much we cannot do and be more free. It is that stigma attached to us all that causes our egos to greatly fall. So when you are feeling like that stigma feels wrong, try looking to your loved ones to help you stay strong. Stigma, it really bothers me. Now, how can we all address the stigma that we face? And I want to leave you with this. We all have FTD of varying forms. Unfortunately, stigma is something we will live with for the rest of our lives. The best thought I can give you is to look the stigma in the eye, give it a cold stare, and push it away. Educate yourself about FTD to learn all you can so you can kindly respond when you are categorized. Please feel like you can talk openly about FTD and the stigma that you feel. I have created a business card with information about the AFTD and hand it to people when I get in this situation. I want to live my life not worrying about what others think. I have my loved ones. And most of all, please remember that you have people who care for you. You have an FTD community that cares for you. You have the AFTD to find out how to deal with your FTD, things like your anxiety and all things FTD. So I truly hope you can find ways to minimize the stigma from your FTD. I would like to take one more moment of your time. I would like to challenge the people with FTD, the healthcare professionals that are here, and the AFTD to address the stigma of FTD that we all face. There is better understanding that is needed to address the issues you have heard from our Persons with FTD Advisory Council. There is education that can be done with health plans, doctors, and other healthcare professionals. There is education and support to be made more readily available for people with FTD and their caregivers. So I call all of you to take action and make this happen. I thank all of you for what you do and who you are. And I would like to end with these words for the musical group Sublime. Lovin', it's what I got. I said, remember that. Lovin' is what I got. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ann, Bob, Seth, Sandy, and Kevin for sharing your insights and your experience. For those of you here in Houston who are interested in talking more about the stigma associated with an FTD diagnosis, one of our 1 p.m. breakout sessions will expand on what you just heard and offers those of you who are diagnosed a chance to share your experience with stigma and your thoughts on how to overcome it. This session is called Personal Experiences with FTD Stigma and is geared specifically towards persons diagnosed. While care partners are welcome to attend this session to provide support and assistance as needed, the Council respectfully asks any care partners attending the session to refrain from joining the conversation. I hope to see some of you there.